Let me stay here. I'll give you what no white woman ever could," begged the alien woman to the human. The storm had swallowed the spine of a Narathus spire, turning the Skybridge into a tunnel of rain and light. Water lashed the steel rails in sheets, so bright they seemed lit from within, each gust sending a pale blue shimmer up from the sea below. The city hummed beneath the floor plates, alive with turbines and pulse lines. But up here, the sound was drowned by the wind. Callan kept his hood low, shoulders squared against the weather, boots finding rhythm on slit decking. He walked like a man who had learned to pace himself through firestorms, measured, steady, unmoved by the violence outside. And he heard it. Not the storm, not the metallic groan of cables. Something closer. Bare feet slapping wet metal. He slowed, pulse tightening. The footsteps stopped. When he turned, she was there. She leaned against the bridge rail, as if the storm had poured her into place, a shape carved from water and violet dusk. Her skin, mauve violet in the stormlight, gleamed under the rain, beads tracing clean lines over ribs and hips. A shredded ceremonial wrap clung half-transparent to her body, threads darkened, weight dragging low against her frame. White hair plastered itself to her chest and shoulders, heavy strands whipping free in the gale. She didn't flinch when their eyes locked. Bronze-flecked irises held him, as though she expected judgment, as though she had been bracing for it all her life. Her voice cut raw through wind. "Let me stay here. I'll give you what no white woman ever could." The words landed like a blade, not coy, not seduction, but a weapon sharpened from despair. Callan's breath slowed. He felt the sting of the sentence, the practiced ugliness of it. How many times she must have spoken it to survive. He did not move at first. The storm boomed against glass and steel around them. Then, quietly, he stepped out from the thin shadow cast by a tower strut and closed the distance by half. Rain hammered his jacket, water coursing off the shoulders. He unfastened the clasp and shrugged it free, holding it for a moment in his hands like an offering. Without touching her skin, he settled it over her shoulders. The fabric sagged instantly, heavy with rain. But it was warmth, it was cover, it was his dot. She caught the lapel at her throat with a trembling hand. The other stayed steady, bronze-fleck eyes searching, measuring. She noticed he wasn't looking down her body, wasn't scanning the bridge for watchers. He only looked at her face, steady, unflinching. "You can come with me?" he said. His voice was low, even against the storm's roar. No trade. Her jaw worked once, a flash of struggle across her features. No thanks passed her lips. No bargain. Just a slow nod, the tiniest fraction of surrender that was not surrender at all, but choice. Callan turned. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't coax. He simply began to walk, boots steady against the slick plates. Behind him, bare feet tapped a careful rhythm, lighter, testing, mapping the bridge like a dancer learning a stage. The storm howled against the glass lift when they stepped inside. Water streaked in bright threads across 3 transparent walls, the city below glowing cobalt and silver. She stood close enough that her shoulder brushed his sleeve, her breath visible in the cooler air. He ignored her shivering as long as he could, but finally reached to the control panel and nudged the heater 2 degrees higher. She noticed the gesture, watching his hand as if it was a lesson. "You have a name," he said, eyes forward. "Syra," she answered, almost swallowed by the storm outside. Then, after a pause, "And you?" "Callan." She repeated it under her breath once, testing the shape of it in her mouth, as if tasting whether it could belong to her story. The lift shuddered downward, wrapped in rain and blue light. For the first time since the storm began, Callan realized he was no longer walking alone. The door of the lift whispered open on a quiet corridor of smoked glass and brushed steel. The storm's roar dimmed to a muffled hiss, the sound of water sliding down the outer walls. Callan stepped out first, boots leaving a trail across polished stone, and paused long enough for her to follow. She came barefoot, her steps slow, shoulders hunched against the oversized jacket, every line of her body poised as if for retreat. At the far end of the hall, his door waited. A matte panel with no markings, just a palm scan inset. He pressed his hand against it, and the seal gave way with a soft click. The panel split and folded aside. Warm air rushed over them as he crossed the threshold into his apartment, a corner unit with wide panes of glass that stacked sea against sky in an endless expanse. She did not cross with him. She stood at the mat just inside the entry, her toes curling on the warm surface, water dripping off the hem of her wrap to darken the floor. Her eyes tracked the space window, desk, couch, kitchen alcove, like a wild creature mapping the edges of a cage. The jacket hung heavy on her frame, sagging with rain. Straight down the hall, Callan said, keeping his voice level, pointing past the main room. Bathroom. Hot water left. Towels on the shelf. He gestured toward the bedroom. I'll set clothes. She didn't move. The air between them thickened. Callan kept his hands visible, relaxed, resisting the urge to step closer. Instead, he passed by her with careful distance, entered the bedroom, and pulled a dark shirt from a drawer, a drawstring short from a bin. He placed them in a folded stack on the bed. He stood an extra moment longer than necessary, breathing slow, learning the rhythm that seemed to keep her in control. When he returned to the living room, she had shifted. Only slightly, her body turned toward him. Her eyes fastened on the bundle in his hands, the tension in her jaw hooked tight. "Syra," he said gently. "The water will help." She nodded once, small and deliberate. Gathering the jacket close like armor, she walked toward the hall with slow, upright steps. The bathroom door clicked shut. A moment later, the sound of rushing water filled the silence. Callan set the clothes on the couch's arm and moved to kitchen alcove. He slipped a mug under the brewer, added frozen sea grounds, and let the sharp, bitter scent bleed into the room. He wiped the floor where she had stood, watching the water vanish into the cloth. He told himself it was only cleaning, but he knew he was buying time to breathe. Steam drifted into the air when the bathroom door opened again. Syra stepped into the hall, hair falling heavy and clean across her shoulders, skin still damp. She wore his shirt, long enough to brush her thighs, and the drawstring short, knotted at her hips. The jacket was gone. Water beaded along the line of her collarbone before vanishing into cloth. She looked taller, not because she had grown, but because her posture had changed. He kept his eyes level. Oh, he felt the shift inside him. "You put this for me," she said, thumb brushing the hem of the shirt. "It smells like rain and metal," he answered, handing her the steaming mug. "Smells like my closet." She wrapped both hands around it, inhaled, and drank once. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her mouth found a small smile, but it vanished fast, like a wild thing darting back into shadows. "In the Skybridge," she said, voice lower now. "I said something ugly." It was not the first time I tried that sentence. Callan didn't flinch. "Did it work before?" "Yes," she said. Her eyes flicked to the floor, then back to him. "It worked until it ruined me." She drank again, steadier this time. "I'm not ruined tonight." Callan nodded. "Nothing more?" He set a folded towel on the chair back and moved to the window. The sea below moved like a giant muscle under the city lights, rain cooling into a softer drizzle. The glass sang with it. When he turned back, she was nearer. Bare feet on the rug, mug at her stomach, eyes steady. The shirt slipped off one shoulder without asking her hand's permission. She didn't fix it. She let it fall where it would, like a simple fact, not a provocation. Callan braced against the instinct to cover her again, and instead chose another path. "You can stay tonight," he said, making it plain. "Take the bed." "I'll take the couch." Her jaw flexed, the storm's fading blue casting lines across her cheekbones. She studied him in silence, searching for the lie. When she found none, her shoulders eased, but she didn't step back. Instead, she closed the last of the distance, heat brushing between them. The shirt's hem brushed against his jeans. Her fingers lifted, hovering near his chest like she was reading the warmth off a road. Her voice came low, almost swallowed by the quiet room. "If I touch you," she said, "it's because I want to, not because I owe. If I stop, you stop. If I say no, you listen. If I say yes, you still listen." Callan met her eyes. "I can do that. I want that." She nodded once, and the nod changed the air between them. Her palm pressed flat to his chest, feeling the muscle tighten and settle. He didn't take her wrist. He didn't guide. He stood still, anchored, as she learned the shape of him through cloth. Dawn pressed pale streaks through the glass, softening the hard edges of the city. The storm had broken sometime in the night, leaving the streets below slick and luminous, towers glistening as though skinned in silver. Callan stirred first, his arm still heavy across Syra's waist, his palm flat on the warmth of her stomach where her breath rose and fell. He hesitated, unsure if she would want the closeness once she woke. But before he could shift away, her hand caught his wrist and held it firm. Her eyes opened slowly, bronze flecks catching the muted light. "You didn't leave," she murmured, her voice rough with sleep, almost testing. "I told you I wouldn't," he said simply. She studied him as though searching for cracks, waiting for the telltale shift that would prove the night had been a mistake. But there was nothing to find. Her lips curved faintly, something between relief and disbelief, and she rolled onto her back, hair spilling across the pillow in white tangles. The oversized shirt she had worn through the night had twisted high, bearing more skin than it covered, but she didn't tug it down. She let him see. "Last night," she began, "I thought maybe you'd change your mind in the dark." "Men usually do. I don't work that way," Callan answered. "Not even when I push myself on you." "You didn't push." She turned her face toward him. "You chose. I chose back. That's all." The silence stretched, but it no longer felt like a gulf. It was something settling, finding weight. She propped herself up on one elbow and studied him with new eyes. "What are you, Callan?" "You carry yourself like a soldier. Straight lines, steady breath. Men don't forget how to move like that." He exhaled through his nose, slow, reluctant. He hadn't spoken of his past in years. But her gaze held steady, not prying, just asking. "Scout pilot," he said finally. "A long time ago. I walked away." "Why?" "Too many lives lost. Too many missions where I didn't know if the orders meant saving or burning. When you can't tell the difference anymore, it's time to stop." Syra's expression didn't shift, but her shoulders eased a little, as though his confession made him less a stranger. She lay back down beside him, hair falling across his shoulder. For a long while, she was quiet. Then, almost too soft to hear, she whispered, "I was paraded, displayed like something sacred, until I wasn't sacred anymore. Then I was ignored, forgotten." Her jaw clenched. "That's why you found me in a wrap instead of a coat." Callan closed his hand around hers. She tightened her grip until his bones pressed, her strength fierce in that small contact. The morning moved on slowly, softened by small gestures that felt almost ordinary. She took his towel without asking. He brewed a second mug of bitter frozen sea coffee without comment. She ate the bread and eggs he set before her with a hunger that looked half-starved, half-hopeful. The shirt still hung loose on her frame, brushing her thighs, collar sliding down one shoulder, Between bites, she asked, "What happens after today? Do you keep me here? Do I become another shadow in your apartment?" Callan leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady over the steam of his cup. "After today, we'll see. I don't regret anything. And I don't treat people like shadows." She narrowed her eyes, testing him, but the sharpness in her voice dulled. She stood and crossed to the window, palm flattening against the glass. Her reflection shimmered faintly beside the skyline, violet skin washed in morning silver. "You won't cast me out when it's inconvenient?" she asked without turning. "No," he said, plain, unwavering. She turned then, leaning against the frame, arms folded under the shirt. One side slid low, exposing the curve of her shoulder, the line of her breast. She didn't adjust it. She watched him watching her, daring him to falter. He held her gaze, not blind to her body, but not stripping her with his eyes either. Steady, certain, her lips quirked, the faintest smile breaking through defenses that had been welded tight. For the first time since she had stepped onto the bridge, she looked like she believed him. The morning light caught in her eyes, and Callan thought, this wasn't a transaction. This was a beginning. The storm had drained away by the time the sun climbed over Narathus' spire, but the city never stayed quiet for long. The skybridges pulsed with commuters, the docks flashed with shifting cargo manifests, and whispers spread faster than the trains, running beneath the sea. By mid-morning, Callan felt the difference. It started with a look from his neighbor across the corridor, a clipped glance at the damp footprints near his door, followed by the sharp turn of shoulders. Later, at the freight office, two clerks murmured when he walked past, one lifting a brow, the other shaking her head with a faint, knowing smirk. Narathus noticed everything, especially when someone didn't fit the city's patterns. When he returned, Sira sat cross-legged on his couch, his shirt still draped on her frame, hair combed but loose, a needle flashing between her fingers as she stitched the ragged ceremonial wrap. The sight struck him. Dignity reclaimed one thread at a time. She looked up when he entered. "They've already begun talking," she said, voice quiet but certain. "You heard?" "I don't need to hear. I can feel it. The city carries whispers in its walls." She tied off the stitch with a practiced twist and set the wrap across her lap. "How long before they knock?" "As long as it takes," Callan answered. He set down the data slate he carried, orders still unresolved, and met her gaze. "I don't care about whispers." Her mouth tightened. "You should. They can erase me with a file entry. That's all it takes here." She rose, the shirt slipping off one shoulder again, her bare feet whispering against the floor. She stopped in front of him, eyes sharp. "Do you regret it? Letting me in?" "No." The word landed hard in the quiet. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. "You'll risk the life you built, the silence you've hidden in?" Her voice pressed, brittle at the edges. "I already risked it," he said, calm as stone. "The moment I carried you through my door." Something flickered across her face, relief, disbelief, hunger, all tangled. She closed the space between them, the hem of the shirt brushing his jeans, her hand finding his chest again, like it had on the first night. Her breath caught. "I don't want to be a transaction anymore," she whispered. "Then you're not." The words loosened something deep inside her. She kissed him harder this time, urgent, fierce. He steadied her with both hands at her waist, not guiding, just anchoring, while she pressed her mouth to his with a hunger that had nothing to do with survival. When they broke, her forehead rested against his cheek, breath quick, steadying. The world outside didn't pause. Somewhere down the hall, boots struck stone, voices murmured in clipped official tones. She stiffened instantly, body braced to flee. Callan tightened his hands on her waist, steady. "Let them whisper," he said, voice low against the side of her face. "I don't owe them answers. She searched his eyes, found no crack, and for the first time, she believed him. The kiss that followed was not born of fear, but of choice. Not by the time the voices faded past the corridor. The decision between them had already been made. The knock came at dusk. Not the hesitant tap of a neighbor, not the hurried rap of a delivery runner, but the flat, deliberate strike of authority. 3 times. Measured. Inevitable. Syra froze where she sat on the couch, the half-mended ceremonial wrap across her lap. Her bronze-flecked eyes darted toward Cowan, wide but steady. He rose without hurry, though he felt the weight of every step. Colin Arend? The voice through the door was filtered, metallic, but carried no warmth. City enforcement. Open. He pressed his palm to the lock, and the panel slid aside to reveal 2 officers in graphite armor, reins still slick on their shoulders. Behind their visors, he could feel the impersonal stare. One held a slate, lines of red text scrolling. We're conducting a sweep. A Zaini female was reported missing from Enclave custody. Witnesses place her entering this residence. The officer lifted the slate so its glow painted Callan's chest. Designation: Syra. Violet skin. White hair. Identifiable by ceremonial wrap. Syra stood slowly behind him, barefoot on the rug, his shirt brushing her thighs. She didn't speak. Didn't move. Cowan felt her breath catch once, then hold. You will release her to us, the second officer said, voice sharp, rehearsed. She is property of the Enclave. She was traded for silence. She does not belong here. The words struck Colin harder than the rain outside. Property. Traded. He steadied his stance, his frame filling the doorway. She's not yours, he said, tone quiet, even. She's not anyone's. She chose here. A pause. Rain hissed down the glass walls beyond, the city glowing cobalt under the storm lights. The officers glanced at each other, a twitch of helmets, then back to him. Refusal to comply will be recorded as obstruction. Callan didn't step aside. Then record it. The silence stretched taut, the corridor humming faint with the city's pulse. Finally, the lead officer lowered the slate a fraction. We'll be back with higher clearance. Boots echoed down the hall, fading until the sound was swallowed by Narathus itself. The door sealed shut. Colin exhaled slow, the air heavy in his chest. Behind him, Syra trembled once, then caught herself. She gripped the half-stitched wrap so tightly the fabric strained under her fingers. They'll come again, she said, her voice stripped of pretense. Next time with papers that say I never existed. They'll take me and you'll vanish with me. Colin turned, kneeling in front of her, his hands open, visible. I told you already. I won't let them erase you. Not while I'm here. Her jaw worked, her eyes shining with a fury that was half fear, half belief struggling to be born. Slowly, she let go of the wrap and reached for his wrist instead. Her grip was iron. They sold me once to buy their silence, she whispered. I won't let them sell me again. If you stand with me, it means war against this city. Callan held her gaze. Then let it be war. Her breath hitched, her chest rising as though she hadn't truly inhaled in years. She leaned into him, pressing her forehead against his. The storm outside flared in pale blue against the glass. But inside the apartment, the decision was already sealed. Night thickened around the spire, the city below glittering like a circuit board pinned against the sea. Syra stood at the window, her palm flat against the glass, the half-mended ceremonial wrap folded neatly on the couch behind her. Callan watched her in silence, sensing the shift in her breathing, the way her shoulders held tension, not from the storm outside, but from something far, older. They'll come again, she said, voice almost swallowed by the hum of turbines. Not because of what I said on that bridge. Not because of you. Because of what I am. Callan stepped closer, his boots soft against the rug. Tell me. She turned, the stormlight catching bronze flecks in her eyes. You thought I was discarded. An ornament no longer wanted. But it was worse. I was never only for display. I was bred to be proof. Half Cyrene, half Alan. A body designed to bind two houses, two enemies. They paraded me as sacred until the war councils collapsed. Then I became a liability. A reminder of failure. So they sold me, not for money, but for silence. Her jaw tightened. They told me I was nothing. But in truth, I am the last carrier. My bloodline is the only one left with the markers both factions can trace. If I disappear, so does the last chance of union. They need me gone because my existence proves what they most fear, that peace is possible. The words hung heavy between them, the stormlight drawing sharp lines across her face. Callan felt the weight of it settle into his bones. Not just a woman left in the ring. Not just desperation wrapped in wet cloth. She was leverage. She was threat. That line I gave you on the bridge, she continued, softer now. I'll give you what no white woman ever could. It wasn't about sex. It was the only weapon they taught me. To bargain my body like coin, to make myself small enough to be wanted. I thought it was all I had. Her voice caught, raw. But with you, it wasn't payment. It was choice. The first I've ever made. Callan reached for her hand, slow, steady. She let him take it, her fingers cold but unflinching. You're not erased, he said. Not here. She studied him, searching his face for doubt, for pity, for the crack that would prove him false. But there was nothing. Only the calm steadiness of a man who had once walked away from war because he could no longer carry death on his shoulders. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent light. Below, ships gathered in the harbor, their beacons blinking through the mist. The officers would return. The enclave would not let her vanish quietly. Syra stepped closer until her forehead pressed against his chest. If I stay, she whispered, they'll make you their enemy. Callan lifted her chin until her eyes met his. Then I'm theirs. Because I'd rather stand against this city than leave you on that bridge again. Something in her broke open then, not into fear, but into fierce, trembling relief. She kissed him, slow at first, then with a fire that burned away the shame of every bargain she had ever been forced to make. His hands anchored her waist, not pulling, just holding steady, as if promising the ground beneath her would never vanish when they drew apart. The storm outside had thinned to mist. The spire lights shimmered pale blue across her violet skin. For the first time since he had met her, her eyes held not just defiance, but belief. They will come for us both, she said. Then let them. Callan answered together. They stood at the glass, the city looming vast and merciless beyond. But inside those walls, something irreversible had begun, not a bargain, not a plea, but a choice made by two people who would not let the world unmake it. The first battle had already been won. She was no longer alone, and he was no longer invisible. Whatever came next would come for them both.